Emma stood in the dim kitchen clutching the folded letter, her breath uneven, the paper trembling like it carried thunder. She whispered, "It says I'm cleared, but cleared doesn't mean forgiven." The rain outside hammered the windows as if testing her resolve. Every drop reminded her of the night her son Daniel hid beneath the table, eyes wide, afraid of her rage that stormed louder than thunder. She pressed the letter flat on the scarred counter, staring at the stains left by spilled whiskey and broken promises. Freedom was in her hands, yet the weight was crushing. She thought of Daniel's small shoes she never threw away, soles scuffed, laces knotted. "I won't lose him again," she said, voice cracking with a vow no storm could shake. The kitchen smelled of wet earth and regret, but Emma stood straighter, steady. Her second chance had a name, and he was waiting for proof. Morning broke gray, the storm passed, but its echo still hummed in Emma's chest. She brewed coffee slowly, listening to the gurgle, each sound pulling her deeper into memory. She whispered, "Daniel always loved the smell of mornings." Her voice cracked as she lifted a cracked mug, sipping bitter warmth. The kitchen now felt both sanctuary and prison, walls whispering her past mistakes. Her gaze fell on the calendar pinned crookedly, the date circled in red, visitation hearing. She pressed her palm against it as though steadying the paper, steadying herself. Freedom was ink on paper, but motherhood was earned in scars. She muttered, "I'll stand in front of them and show who I am now, not who I was." The silence around her was heavy, but inside her chest, something new stirred, a fragile defiance. Emma sat at the kitchen table, the sound of ticking filling the room. She picked up the phone, thumb hovering over Daniel's number. Her chest tightened. She whispered, "He might not answer." The silence screamed. She set the phone down, then picked it up again, her body restless with the weight of the choice. The call wasn't just a dial, it was an open wound waiting to be touched. She imagined his voice, deeper now, older, holding judgment she feared but needed to face. Her hand shook. One call can't fix the years, but it can begin, she told herself, staring at the digits glowing faintly. The courage was thin but real. She inhaled sharply, pressed her lips tight, and hovered on the brink of connection. The phone never left her hand as Emma paced the narrow kitchen floor, worn tiles creaking beneath her. She whispered, "Daniel deserves more than hesitation." Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Haunted eyes, clenched jaw, restless body. She touched the scar on her wrist and froze, remembering the night everything broke. Shadows of past storms seemed to circle her, urging her to surrender. Yet she stood still, palm pressing against the glass, grounding herself. The silence carried Daniel's laugh from long ago, faint like an echo. Emma said, "I can't erase the past, but I can fight for today." The vow returned sharper, steadier, her voice a blade slicing the still air. Emma finally placed the phone down on the counter, her pulse pounding in her ears. She whispered, "Not today, but soon." A storm had passed outside, but a storm remained inside her, twisting and clawing. She reached for Daniel's shoes again, holding them to her chest like a relic, her fingers trembling against the frayed laces. "I'll show him I kept them because I never let go," she said softly, eyes burning. The silence in the kitchen was no longer cruel but waiting. She leaned against the counter, shoulders dropping slightly, breath coming slower. Her second chance wasn't just a date or a letter, it was proof, lived day by day. The vow anchored her once more, a storm she would not break under. Emma sat on the edge of her bed, light filtering through half-closed blinds, streaking lines across her tired face. She whispered, "I was the storm, and he was the one who hid from me." The thought cut deeper than any punishment. She remembered Daniel's eyes, wide with fear. The night she shattered the glass, and shouted until silence swallowed him whole. That memory had followed her like a shadow stitched to her skin. She clenched her fists, nails pressing against her palms, and muttered, "Never again." She picked up the small silver cross that had been her mother's, holding it between her fingers, as if it could burn the guilt away. Emma said, "I'll pay whatever it costs, I just want the right to show up again." Her voice carried into the quiet room like a fragile prayer refusing to break. The kitchen clock ticked louder than her breath as Emma rehearsed in whispers. I won't let fear win. I will stand and say I've changed. Her reflection in the dark window stared back like a jury. She remembered her mother's voice, sharp and final, refusing to sign the paper that could have saved her years ago. You must carry the weight you've made, her mother had said, and Emma carried it still. But now she imagined Daniel's voice, not her mother's, asking if she deserved a place in his world. Emma pressed her palm against her chest, steadying her breath. She muttered, "The past is a scar, not a sentence." She straightened her back, eyes locked on her reflection, daring it to disagree. Emma walked into the community center, her heart hammering with each step. The smell of floor polish and coffee wrapped around her. She spotted Linda, her sponsor, waiting with crossed arms and steady eyes. Linda said, "You're late, Emma." Emma lowered her gaze, whispering, "I'm here." The weight of those two words carried years of broken promises. Linda's silence was sharper than anger, her stare a mirror Emma couldn't avoid. She swallowed hard, muttering, "I want to be better, but I don't know if wanting is enough." Linda finally nodded and said, "Then prove it, day by day. No speeches, just proof." Emma felt her throat tighten, but she stood taller. Proof was all she had left to give. Later, Emma lingered outside the community center doors, cold air pressing against her skin. She whispered, "She's right. No speeches. Just proof." The street was empty, except for the hum of a distant car. Her hand brushed the scarred wood of the doorframe as if it could anchor her. She remembered Daniel's laugh when he was small, the way it filled the air like music. Now silence filled that space. Emma exhaled slowly and muttered, "I'll give him something solid, not just words." She stepped away from the building, shoulders squared. The night was sharp, but her steps were steady. She didn't carry hope tonight, she carried resolve, and that weight felt different. Emma returned home, the silence thick as she entered the small kitchen again. She placed her mother's silver cross on the counter beside the letter, the two symbols clashing, one of judgment, one of release. She whispered, "I can't change what I broke, but I can change what I build." She reached for the calendar, fingers brushing over the red circle marking the hearing date. The paper felt thin, fragile, like the line between loss and redemption. Her voice steadied as she muttered, "For Daniel, I'll show every day that I am not who I was." She exhaled, letting the words live in the room, anchoring them in the air. The vow had shape now, carried not by hope but by choice. Emma stood at the bus stop clutching a folder of job applications. The cold morning wind bit into her skin, sharp as the doubts in her chest. She whispered, "If I miss this chance, I don't get another." A bus roared past, splashing muddy water across her shoes, soaking the only pair she owned. She winced but didn't move, holding tighter to the folder. People glanced at her, then looked away, as if her desperation was contagious. She whispered again, "Hold steady, just hold steady." The bus she needed arrived late, hissing like it was already tired of her. She climbed aboard with soaked feet and clenched jaw. Emma's second chance was already demanding payment, and she paid with every step. Inside the HR office, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Emma sat across from Mr. Carter, the manager. His eyes flicked between her resume and her face, measuring. He said, "You've been out of work a long time." Emma nodded, replying, "I've been rebuilding." His silence pressed on her like a weight. She tightened her grip on the chair's arms, muttering softly, "I can do the work. I won't fail again." Mr. Carter's expression softened, but only slightly. "We'll need references, proof you can be trusted." The word proof echoed in her mind like a hammer against stone. Emma swallowed, forcing herself not to shrink back. "Then I'll show you," she said firmly, even as her stomach knotted. Later, Emma sat on a park bench, folder clutched against her chest, the rejection echoing in her ears. "References," she muttered, bitter laughter escaping. The sun was bright, but her world still felt gray. Linda appeared, steady stride, arms folded as always. She said, "You told them the truth?" Emma nodded quickly. "Every word." Linda sat beside her, gaze unflinching. "Then keep showing up, that's all you've got." Emma looked at her, eyes wet, and whispered, "It feels like nothing's enough." Linda's hand landed on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "It never is at first. Do it anyway." Emma exhaled, torn between defeat and the faintest spark of strength. Emma returned home late, her shoes leaving damp prints on the floor. She whispered, "Another door shut. But I'm still here." She placed the rejection letter on the counter beside the silver cross. The symbols stacked higher, proof of battles lost and still fought. She stared at the crooked calendar, the red circle pulling her forward like a beacon and a threat. Her chest tightened as she imagined Daniel asking, "What have you done for me today?" She clenched her fists, muttering, "I'll keep showing up." The kitchen walls pressed closer, but her vow pushed back. The day had drained her, but surrender wasn't on the table anymore. That night, Emma lay awake on her bed, staring at the ceiling where shadows drifted like restless ghosts. Her mind replayed every rejection, every doubt, every whisper of failure. She turned onto her side, clutching Daniel's shoes to her chest, whispering, "I'm not the woman who made you hide. I swear it." Tears slid silently into the pillow. The house creaked, the night stretched, but inside her chest, the vow refused to dim. She imagined the day of the hearing, Daniel's eyes fixed on her, judgment heavy but necessary. She said aloud, "I'll take the weight, all of it, if it means I get to stand in front of you." The silence gave no answer, but she believed it was listening. Emma arrived at Linda's office, expecting another lecture about patience. Instead, Linda slid a file across the desk. "I thought you should see this," she said. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside lay a statement from years ago. Her mother had testified against her, harsher than Emma ever knew. Her chest tightened, air refusing to fill her lungs. She whispered, "She buried me deeper than I realized." Linda's voice was steady, not cruel. She thought it was the only way to protect Daniel. Emma's jaw clenched, eyes burning. "Protect him from me," she muttered. The weight of betrayal pressed down harder than any cell wall. Truth wasn't just painful, it rewrote the story she'd told herself for years. Emma stormed out into the cold evening, files still clutched against her chest. She whispered, "All this time I thought she gave up on me. She thought she was saving him." The street buzzed faintly with traffic, but her world was roaring silence. She leaned against a brick wall, forehead pressed against the cold surface. Her mind replayed Daniel's terrified face that night, and now it made sense why her mother never opened the door again. Emma muttered, "She locked me out to keep him safe." The truth cut like glass, both unbearable and undeniable. It wasn't abandonment, it was protection. And now, Emma had to live with the cost of that clarity. Back home, Emma sat at the table with the file open before her. Each line was her mother's words, cold but deliberate. "Unfit, dangerous, needs structure before she can be trusted." Emma whispered the words aloud, each syllable burning her throat. She slammed the file shut, trembling. She thought she was saving him by breaking me. The silence answered with no comfort. She reached for Daniel's shoes, pressing them against her chest like a shield. Her voice cracked as she said, "I'll prove her wrong. I'll prove it to both of them." The twist didn't erase the past. It raised the price of her redemption. She had to rebuild not only with Daniel, but through the shadow of her mother's judgment. Emma met Linda the next day at the community center, anger still crackling under her skin. "She destroyed me," Emma said, voice sharp. Linda shook her head. "She saved him. Sometimes saving one means sacrificing another." Emma stared, chest heaving. "So I was the cost." Linda's eyes softened, but held steady. "You were the storm then. She chose the child who needed calm." Emma turned away, biting her lip until it bled. The contradiction was unbearable. Her mother had betrayed her and protected Daniel all in one act. Emma whispered, "Then I'll show them both who I am now." The vow wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about reclaiming her name from her mother's shadow. That night, Emma lit a candle on the kitchen table, the small flame flickering against the darkness. She whispered, "If she sacrificed me, then I'll sacrifice my pride. I'll stand even in her truth." The phial lay closed beside the flame, its weight undeniable. Emma placed the silver cross on top of it, a symbol of the mother who had judged her and the faith she refused to abandon. She said softly, "Earning this second chance will cost more than I imagined, but I'll pay it." The flame wavered as if nodding in agreement. Emma leaned back, eyes steady now, shoulders squared. The twist had not broken her. It had carved a sharper edge into her resolve. The courtroom was colder than Emma imagined. She sat at the long wooden table, Daniel across the aisle beside her mother. His face was older now, leaner, no trace of the child who once hid from storms. Emma's heart ached at the distance. The judge asked, "Why should custody be reconsidered?" Emma's palms sweated, but she stood. "Because I am not who I was," she said, voice trembling but loud. Her eyes locked on Daniel's. "I cannot undo what I broke, but I can be what he needs now." The room hummed with murmurs, but Emma's gaze didn't falter. Every word carried the weight of years, her pride stripped bare, her plea naked and costly. Her mother rose slowly, voice calm but firm. "Emma cannot erase what happened. Daniel needs safety, not more storms." Emma flinched but didn't drop her gaze. She whispered, "She's not wrong." Daniel shifted in his seat, eyes flicking between the two women. Emma straightened, voice breaking yet steady. "Yes, I was the storm. But storms end. I've built calm. I've built truth. All I ask is a chance to prove it." The silence stretched heavy. Emma's pride bled onto the floor, replaced only by raw, costly honesty. This wasn't defense, it was confession. The judge leaned forward, tone measured. "You speak of change, but change is not claimed, it is proven." Emma nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. "Then let me prove it, day by day with action, not words." The judge's gavel tapped lightly, not final but cautious. Emma's knees weakened, but she refused to sit. She whispered to herself, "Stand even if it breaks you." Daniel glanced at her then, his eyes sharp but searching. It was not forgiveness, but it was recognition. That look carried more weight than the judge's words. Emma returned to her seat, body heavy as stone. Her mother whispered sharply, "You think tears and words erase the past?" Emma turned, meeting her gaze. "No, but they begin the work." Her mother's lips parted in surprise, but she said nothing more. Daniel stared at the shoes Emma had placed on the table beside her papers, recognition flickering in his eyes. Emma whispered toward him, voice barely audible, "I kept them because I never let go." For the first time, Daniel didn't look away. The choice was made. Emma had offered her truth, and the cost was her pride stripped bare before them all. The gavel struck once. The judge's voice cut through the silence. "Visitation will be granted under supervision. Prove yourself, and more may follow." Emma closed her eyes, relief and fear colliding. This was no victory. It was an opening, narrow but real. She whispered, "Thank you," not to the judge but to Daniel, who kept watching her. The shoes sat between them like a bridge, fragile but present. Emma knew the cost was only beginning. The climax had not freed her, it had bound her to the work ahead. Yet her vow lived, sharper than ever. She would not break this chance. Not again. Emma stood outside the courthouse, the winter air crisp against her skin. The judgment still echoed in her ears, visitation under supervision. It wasn't freedom, but it was a door, cracked open. She whispered, "This is my start." Daniel and her mother walked ahead, their silhouettes sharp against the pale sky. Emma didn't call out. She knew the distance was still needed. Instead, she slipped her hands into her pockets, clutching the folded shoestring she'd carried with her. Step by step, she muttered, steadying her breath. The city roared around her, but in that moment she felt anchored. A door had opened, and she intended to walk through it, no matter how narrow. The first supervised visit took place in a small community room, painted pale yellow. Daniel sat at one end of the table, arms crossed, while Emma sat at the other, palms flat on the wood. She whispered, "Thank you for coming." Daniel shrugged, eyes on the clock. Emma fought the urge to fill the silence with apologies. Instead, she placed the small shoes gently on the table. "I kept them," she said softly. Daniel glanced, expression guarded, but he didn't look away this time. Emma's chest tightened with fragile hope. One look, one breath, one moment, that was enough to build on. After the visit, Emma walked home in the rain, her coat soaked through but her steps steady. She whispered, "He didn't look away." It was a small thing, but it lived inside her like fire. The street shimmered under neon lights, reflecting on wet pavement. Cars hissed past, but Emma barely noticed. She held the shoes in her bag close, as if they pulsed with meaning. Every raindrop that struck her felt like baptism, washing her clean inch by inch. Day by day, she muttered. She no longer measured redemption in victories. She measured it in looks not avoided, doors cracked open, and silence that wasn't hostile anymore. At home, Emma sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, scribbling in a notebook. "Proof," she whispered, writing lists of daily goals. Meetings attended, hours worked, visits kept. Each check mark would be her testimony. She taped the list beside the calendar, the red circle now surrounded by new notes and reminders. The kitchen no longer felt like a prison. It was becoming a ledger, a place of evidence. Emma pressed the pen against the page until it almost tore. "I will not fail again," she muttered. The vow lived not in grand speeches but in ink, paper, and days stacked together like bricks in a new foundation. The second visit came weeks later. Daniel sat quieter this time, less rigid, though still guarded. Emma smiled faintly and whispered, "How's school?" He shrugged, but didn't retreat. She didn't push, letting silence hold them. Instead, she placed a notebook on the table, pages filled with check marks. "I'm keeping track," she said softly. Daniel's eyes flicked toward it, curious despite himself. For the first time, his lips moved. "Why? Why?" Emma leaned forward, voice steady. "So, you don't have to take my word for it. You'll see." Daniel didn't reply, but the corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smirk. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. Emma sat in the visitation room again, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Daniel entered slowly, this time without glancing toward her mother. He sat across from Emma, arms looser than before. She whispered, "Thank you for coming back." Daniel shrugged, but his eyes lingered on her longer than before. The silence stretched, but it wasn't hostile, it was cautious. Emma placed the shoes on the table again, her fingers brushing the frayed laces. "I kept them because I couldn't let go of you," she said softly. Daniel finally spoke, voice low but steady. "Then prove it." Emma's chest tightened, but she nodded. This was not forgiveness, but it was a demand, and she would carry it. That night, Emma walked home beneath the cold glow of street lamps. The shoes were in her bag, heavier than ever. She whispered, "He spoke, he asked me to prove it." Every syllable replayed like a drumbeat in her mind. The city hummed around her, cars, footsteps, distant laughter, but she walked alone, shoulders squared. Each step struck like a promise. She didn't carry victory, she carried obligation. Proof was not a word, it was a life she had to build piece by piece. Emma's lips curved faintly, not into a smile, but into determination. She muttered, "This time, I won't vanish." The night air cut sharp, but she welcomed the sting. In her kitchen, Emma pinned her notebook to the wall beside the calendar. Pages fluttered with check marks, the paper weighted with effort. She whispered, "He'll see it. One day, he'll know this was real." The silver cross glinted faintly on the counter, the letter folded beneath it. These weren't symbols of ruin anymore. They were markers of the path she'd walked. Emma touched the shoestring tucked in her pocket, rounding herself. She muttered, "I'll never go back." The kitchen, once filled with regret, now carried quiet resolve. For the first time, the silence felt like peace, not punishment. Weeks later, Emma met Daniel again. He walked into the room slower this time, his eyes less guarded. He sat across from her, pulling his hoodie tighter. Emma smiled faintly but didn't rush. She opened the notebook and slid it toward him. "I said I'd prove it," she whispered. Daniel flipped through the pages, each checkmark a stone laid in the foundation between them. His lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. Still, he didn't push the notebook away. Emma exhaled, chest loosening. For the first time, Daniel didn't just sit across from her, he shared the space. That was enough. That night, Emma returned home and stood in the kitchen where Daniel once hid. She placed the shoes on the counter, beside the cross and the file, their meanings forever altered. She whispered, "Second chances aren't free. I'll keep paying." Her voice carried steady, no longer a plea but a declaration. The kitchen walls, once suffocating, now felt like witnesses. She touched the shoes one last time before turning off the light. The silence wrapped around her, not as judgment, but as proof she had survived her own storm. The vow she made stood unshaken. The final truth lingered sharp. She had been the storm, but now she was the shelter.